all trade with each other. If we opt to trade between ourselves in a different manner, we need not involve the government in our daily lives at all, and they'll soon go away.
Well, that's an interesting thought. We do have a question in regards to kind of the finances there that came out of the chat box, and Michael would like to know if you see gold and when you see gold rising, because I don't know if that's going to be...
That's a curious sense now. It depends on the metric you use to judge gold, because gold is rising, and it's already broken a long-term relationship that has held up for 100-plus years, and that is the gold-to-oil relationship. We now have a situation where gold, and then the oscillations will start to become extreme. But do not take this as trading advice, because we have clear indications that if you're playing around in the paper gold and silver markets, you're going to be caught out. That is to say, you will lose everything you're investing in them. It's just a matter of who gets caught out and when it specifically happens. But the end of it all is relatively soon, and that is before summer, and that contributes to the summer of hell. Because, for instance, if the dollar is dead, then Social Security payments are worthless. Welfare payments are worthless. Paychecks to military is worthless. We won't have money to buy oil to fuel the diesel destroyers or other... We won't have money for kerosene to buy, to fuel for airplanes, to get our military home, yet we won't be able to pay countries to support them. And so the American empire dies a very rapid and much more harsh form of death than the Soviet empire. But it will be every bit as fast, if not faster.
Well, and interesting that you brought that up, because I was thinking about this actually a couple days ago about, when the dollar dies, what's going to happen to, like, specifically, because I have a father that's elderly, and what would happen to him if his Social Security stopped? What would he do?
That's a good question.
And, and I think about all the people getting ready to retire, or the people that just went into retirement, and what would these people do? And, if there's no dollar, if there's nothing for them to trade, kind of a thing, if they haven't been gold or silver collecting or, keeping it or what have you, what do they do?
Well,
because they've gotten more accustomed to it than those that have not retired yet.
Yeah, and our previous, our only real example of a major empire decaying in a globalized society is Russia, or the old Soviet Union.
Right.
And when it went, pensioners, the basic difference between the Soviet Union and the U.S. is that the Soviet Union had collectivized housing, so no one was foreclosed on. No one was kicked out of their house when the empire collapsed. So you still had a roof over your head. That, as we're seeing here in the United States, is not happening, and that's going to cause vast areas of social confusion and change as our social contract unwinds. And by that I mean the contract whereby many humans in the U.S. expect government to take care of them in exchange for obedience and behaving nicely. And that social contract is going to go away, and these people won't behave nicely, and they won't really pay much attention to what's left of the government, and that all starts this summer.
So, okay, so in your report, in any of your reports about that, what is it? I read the last report, and I really wish I had reread it again so that I could be a little clearer on this next statement I'm making to you. But there was something that you had said in there about what happens when this actual collapse begins and what happens to some of the population. Do you know what I'm talking about here?
You mean the diaspora, the wandering around, the foreclosing, the...
Yes, all of that. Maybe you could say something more about that, because I think that's really important for people. I think that's what people really need to know about. So that this is all about preparing people and also informing, and that's what we're here for tonight.
It's our projections that, given the way in which the economy is going to go, and beyond that, the death of the fiscal and financial system, which actually is on top of it, is an abstraction of our economy, that we're going to see diaspora, which means the people are scattered, and we're going to see various different kinds of scattering. For instance, in the early stages of this year, we're going to start to see reports, just as an example, that a city right next to you there in Kansas may have, 50 jobs, and the next thing you know, 8,000 people relocate to that little town. So we'll see that kind of a misplaced movement as people try and stay alive in the desperate situations that are going to occur. And it'll get to the point where pretty soon we're going to see a generalized acceptance of house squatting, what we're calling the fuzzy revolution, where people will be cold, hungry, tired, will have been tired of being kicked around from shelter to shelter. The number of shelters will be woefully inadequate to the millions of people that will be foreclosed upon, and many people will just say, well, to hell with this, and they'll either go back to their old house that they were foreclosed out of, or just pick a new one that's been empty and kick open the door or replace the door, and that's it. They live there now. And this will cause, at the beginning, in some areas, there will be law enforcement that will try and enforce laws on behalf of the bankers and the supposed people that, quote, own those properties. And there will be confrontations between law enforcement and these groups of people that will be squatting. Some of the confrontations will not be nice and will end badly for all parties. In the end, though, that is to say, as we go further in 2009, this movement will gradually shift to the point where law enforcement just won't care anymore. As long as you're not causing any problems for them and they're still getting a paycheck, which will be kind of dodgy itself, they're not going to be causing anybody any big problem. And that's about the time we get into the May and the fierceness that accompanies the overall breakdown of the dollar distribution system, if you will. And it's somewhat similar to what occurred in Argentina when they had their monetary crisis in the early part of 2000, only on a vast scale. And then we're going to have weather issues as well, which will drive people around because they won't, while they may have a house that they can live in, they may not have any form of income to provide heat, etc. And so they may decide, well, it's too cold here, and get the family and move south. And we'll see the same kind of population shifts as we saw in the Arkies and Okies shifts to California, only it'll probably be the reverse of that, and out of the northern states down into the southern states, just where it'll be considered anyway easier to survive.
Well, and all of this is, as you're sitting here talking, and you've just talked about Argentina, you've talked about Russia, you've talked about similar instances that has happened, globally. So I think that's what people here in the United States need to understand, that other countries have went through this, and of course what affects us will also affect some other countries as well, as we well know.
Yeah.
And we're all going to be experiencing this, and the changes upon changes is one of the things that I think is very important, is for us maybe not to all run around and losing our heads over all of this, because it's all going to work itself out one way or the other. And it really will work itself out one way or the other. I mean, because this is not about business as usual. That's what all of this has been about for the past 10 years, is about growing to this point.
Yeah. I
mean, it really is just as clear as the writing on the wall. Now, we have, I think, about 10 minutes, left in this first hour, Clif, and I have another question, and it does move off of this subject. If you would like,
that's fine.
Okay,
Wherever
now
you
this
lead.
one is about that alien artifact that you talked about in your language before.
Okay, now this is something we've been seeing for a long time in the data, so it's apparently going to have some level of large-scale impact on the global populace. And we got information, I want to say maybe 4 or 5 Alta reports back, that there was something brewing where what we've come to think of as an alien artifact and or ancient technology, maybe from a previous human civilization, who knows, or some other alien civilization, we just don't know. But basically an artifact of unknown origin and use that was going to be, quote, liberated. And actually the terms that came out described the person that liberated it as mainly too intelligent and too bored with the work he was being given by the powers that be, and he saw an opportunity and he snatched this little device out of a particular black drawer in a black box in a black room in a black organization that shouldn't exist. And at some point, and I think it was just so he could figure out what it did, and at some point, this was about 3 or 4 Alta reports back, we started getting indications that this fellow who had taken this device was in contact with another individual who apparently had another device or some other component connected to that, and the powers that be are after them. And that's apparently ongoing right at the moment. The device description we have is vague at best, because bear in mind we're dealing with linguistics that come out based on what people will say, not about the actual event. And so as an example, I'll offer the power outage in the Northeast a few years back, when it just happened all of a sudden and the whole Northeast was 5 states or more were blacked out, and there was all kinds of consternation, and instantly everybody thought it was terrorism. Well, 3 weeks before that event, we'd actually forecast it, and forecast the terrorism word associated with it. Not that it would be caused by it, but that would be associated with it. So basically, it's kind of like looking at a newspaper through a dim, dark glass, and that newspaper is after the event, and we try and get whatever we can out of the headlines, and that's the best we can do for our forecast. So insofar as the device is concerned, we have a few words that describe it as a coherer, not in the sense of listening, although sound, of course, is involved, but basically a coherer of vibration. Or if one wanted to think about it a different way and interpret it a different way, one might be able to look at it as, say, a replicator or a stabilizer kind of a device, in the sense that theoretically, insofar as we're able to understand the linguistics and putting a lot of speculation behind it, we think what the device is, or what it does, is allow people to actually cause changes in physical reality through a mental process.
Whoa.
Like right in front of them. Its impact is apparently has some aspects of duality, in the sense that if you wanted a broad impact, it would be very shallow. But if you wanted to create a snow cone, no worries, right?
Ah.
Okay, so you could do a little tiny snow cone, and it would be nice and solid, and it would hold up. But if you wanted to do a Volkswagen, it might be a little shimmery and wouldn't run, that kind of a thing.
Okay.
Okay, that's the best we can do in terms of the description. We know these people are moving from east to west. We think that the powers that be are really not so much, they don't care about the individuals so much, and I don't even think they'd punish the fellows if they got them. They just don't want this device out and about. And we have a lot of fear words about that device coming from the powers that be entity, which is the collection of all those linguistics that go to the invisible hand and the power elite that actually run the planet. Make sense?
It does, absolutely perfect sense.
Okay, and that's really where we're at now. We suspect from the visibility numbers, which are the numbers that we associate with how quickly it'll rise and get into newspapers and mainstream media, we suspect that there will be some level of visibility about this whole chase and device this summer, and that later on in fall we'll get another big bump in visibility, and then sometime in 2010 it'll actually come out in a more, or in a broader-based level. However, as we get into 2010, visibility numbers start dropping, in the sense that all over, generally, we suspect things will be so chaotic in the year 2010 that mainstream media and this kind of thing may not be as reliable or as available as we might like, and therefore we might have a small newspaper
around the Obama administration, as far as anything that comes out of that at all for 2009, as far as the actual administration or the presidency or anything like that.
We have a lot of language that goes to that effect, but curiously, most of it's rather bland and non-distinct at this stage.
Interesting.
We don't have much in the way of a personality on it, and that which we do have tends to be absolutely subsumed by and overwhelmed by all of the problems that they're having to deal with as they go forward. And bear in mind that in spite of appearances, there is no change going on here.